Her phone was face up on the kitchen counter, screen lit, and the name on it was my husband's name. I was holding a mug of coffee I don't remember making, steam rising slow. Her apartment window was cracked open, and the light of a March afternoon in Atlanta came in at an angle, the kind that makes everything look softer than it is. She was in the bathroom. I heard the flush. I heard the faucet. I heard her footsteps coming back, and I was still staring at that screen. It wasn't a good morning text. It wasn't a voice memo about dinner. It was a photo, and underneath the photo, a message. I'm not going to repeat that message here because some things you don't need to hear twice, but I need you to understand what it meant. It could only have been sent by a woman who had already been in a bed with him. I set the mug down on the counter with a steadiness I have no idea where I found. My fingers were cold. My stomach had dropped to somewhere I didn't know existed inside my body. And when she came through the hallway door and saw me standing there, she smiled. That smile. I need you to hold on to that smile because it's going to come back in this story, and when it does, you'll understand what I understood that March afternoon. "You okay?" she asked, running a hand through her hair. "I'm fine," I said, and that was the biggest lie I have ever told in my life. But I wasn't lying to her. I was lying to myself, because the truth I was holding in that moment weighed more than I could carry standing up. In her kitchen, with the coffee going cold on the counter and my husband's name glowing on her phone screen like it was the most normal thing in the world. But for you to understand the size of what I lost in that second, I need to tell you who she was to me. My name is Michelle. I'm 38 years old, I'm an architect, and I have my own firm in Buckhead that took me 6 years to build from nothing. And for most of my adult life, the person I trusted most in the world was named Desiree. Desiree was my younger sister, 32 years old when all of this happened. 6 years between us that, for decades, meant nothing more than me arriving at everything first: school, career, marriage. I need to tell you about one specific night so you understand what she was to me before she became what she is now. It was October of 2015. Our mother died on a Monday morning, after 3 months in the hospital with a cancer that moved faster than any of us expected. I was in Atlanta. Desiree was in Savannah. We met at the hospital in Atlanta that afternoon, and afterward, when the doctors and the paperwork and the condolence hugs from people finally ended, we were alone in our mother's house. It was almost midnight. I was sitting on the floor of her bedroom with a photo album in my lap that I didn't have the courage to open. Desiree came in without knocking, sat down beside me, and stayed. She didn't say anything. She didn't try to cheer me up. She didn't tell me it was going to be okay. She just stayed, and when I finally opened the album and started to cry, she cried with me. We stayed there on the floor, the two of us, until 3 a.m, turning each page slowly, laughing at the bad photos, crying at the good ones. That's the kind of thing that makes you believe you have a real sister. After that night, our mother left me her house in Buckhead, a high-end property in one of Atlanta's most established neighborhoods, appraised at the time at $1.2 million, purchased back in the 90s and fully paid off. It was my inheritance. Title was in my name from the start. I spent over a year renovating that house, room by room, wall by wall. Every space had a decision of mine inside it. In the entryway, I framed the original floor plan. The first version I drew by hand, before moving it to CAD. It was the only object in that house that was at the same time my work and my history. A framed architectural drawing that anyone who walked through the front door would see before they saw anything else. That was the house where I married Marcus. Marcus was 41 years old when everything fell apart. Civil engineer, steady, reliable, the kind of man who gets to places early and doesn't make a scene. I met him at a real estate development conference in Atlanta in the summer of 2017. We were introduced through a mutual colleague, and 2 years later, we were married. He moved into the Buckhead house with me. He loved that place. He loved the framed floor plan. He'd always tell guests, "Michelle designed all of this before we touched a single wall." Desiree was at our wedding. Desiree was the first person I called when I found out I was pregnant. A pregnancy that didn't make it in early 2021, a loss that left me broken for months. And Desiree was there beside me during those months too. I didn't know yet that I was counting the last days I could trust the two people I loved most in the world. Before I tell you what happened after that afternoon in her kitchen, what I saw, what I did, and how it all ended, I need to ask you something. If you've ever been betrayed by someone inside your own family, someone who should have been your safe place, write right here in the comments. Did someone who smiled in your face deserve your trust? And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it right now. Every week there's a new story. And some weeks that story is yours. The signs were there. I know that now. I know it with the bitter clarity of someone who has spent years replaying every scene, every conversation, every moment she chose not to see what was right in front of her. The first sign appeared in March of 2021, 2 months after Desiree ended a 3-year relationship with a man who treated her badly. She was devastated. At least that's what she said. And I did what every older sister does. I opened the door. I told her to come stay in Atlanta for a few days, that the house was big, that the change of scenery would do her good. A few days turned into 3 weeks. And during those 3 weeks, Desiree and Marcus spent a lot of time together while I was at the office. I worked 8 to 7, sometimes later. They were home. She cooked. He helped. They had dinner together when I ran late. At the time, I thought, how nice that they get along. How nice that she has company. What I didn't see was that in those 3 weeks, she learned everything. His rhythms, his preferences, the complaints he had about me that I had told her in moments of weakness, that I worked too much, that I was sometimes checked out, that our intimacy had cooled after the pregnancy loss. I handed her the map of my vulnerabilities without realizing she already had the destination in mind. The second sign came in July of 2021. I was on a work trip in Charlotte, 4 days to present a project to a new client. Marcus stayed in Atlanta. When I got home, there was a mug in the wrong spot in the kitchen. That bothered me because I have a specific way of organizing things, and Marcus knew it. When I asked, he said he'd cleaned the kitchen and didn't remember where it went. I accepted that. But there was also a scent in the bathroom. Not his, not mine. Too sweet, too young. I looked at him and he was looking at his phone. At the time, I thought, how thoughtful that he cleaned the kitchen on his own. Now I know the thoughtfulness was the cover. The third sign was a conversation I need to tell you with the exact words, because it was the coldest lie I have ever heard. It was September of 2021. Desiree and I were on a video call. She was in Savannah, I was in Atlanta. At some point I mentioned that Marcus had come home late from work 3 days in a row and that I was worried, that he seemed distant. Desiree paused, and then she said, "Michelle, you know how men get. When something's going on at work, they shut down. Don't go making something out of nothing." I remember exactly how she said it. Calm, steady, like someone who knows more than you. At the time, I thought it was the wisdom of a younger sister who'd been through a hard relationship. Now I know it was the voice of a woman who was, at that precise moment, protecting a secret she had helped to create. The fourth sign was the hardest to ignore, and I still managed to. In November of 2021, Miss Gloria, our downstairs neighbor, a 63-year-old widow I'd known since I moved into the house, knocked on my door one Saturday afternoon. She said she needed to tell me something, but she stood there in the doorway, hesitating, with the look of someone carrying a weight on her conscience, but not sure she should speak. She said she'd seen a young woman get dropped off at the house several times when I wasn't there. Tall, natural hair. At the time, I said it was probably a friend of Marcus's, someone he'd had over to pick something up. Not a big deal. Miss Gloria nodded with that expression of someone who doesn't believe you but doesn't want to argue. I closed the door and told myself I wasn't going to think about it, or pretended I wasn't, because there's a flashback that comes back to me every time I revisit those months, and it's a scene that at the time felt like warmth, and now feels like evidence. It was still during those 3 weeks Desiree was staying with us in March of 2021. One night, I came home late from the office and found the two of them in the living room, her on the couch with her head tilted slightly, him on the other side, and they were talking low about something that stopped when I walked in. Desiree turned to me with that smile of hers, open, bright, the smile of a little sister you spend your whole life looking out for, and said, "I was waiting for you, Shell. I made dinner." And Marcus got up to hug me, and I felt like the luckiest woman alive. The scene I read as warmth was complicity. The dinner was an alibi. I don't know exactly when things started between them, but I know that in December of 2021, Marcus said he needed to go to Savannah for 3 days for work, a project running behind, a client demanding FaceTime. He left on a Wednesday. I stayed in Atlanta with my projects, my drawings, my framed floor plan in the entryway, and the feeling that something was off that I couldn't name. Miss Gloria named it for me. She called my cell on Thursday night, said she needed to tell me something that her son, Mr. Theodore, the building's property manager, had received. A call from Marcus, placed from a hotel in Savannah, asking Mr. Theodore not to mention that he'd seen someone arrive with him before the trip. Mr. Theodore, a 68-year-old man who has managed that property for over 15 years and has more integrity than most people I know, was unsettled by that request, he told his mother. And his mother called me. "Michelle, I should have said something sooner," Miss Gloria said, with the voice of someone who has carried guilt longer than she should have. "I didn't want to get in your business, but that girl came to the house more than once. I asked for the name of the hotel. I don't know why." My voice came out steady, like the voice of someone who is falling. She gave it to me. It was Friday morning when I got on I-16 towards Savannah. I drove alone. I didn't call anyone. I drove the 248 miles without music, without the radio, hands on the wheel, and a clarity of thought that only shows up when your body understands before your mind that the world has just changed. The hotel was off Abercorn Street, a mid-size place, the kind that doesn't show up on anyone's recommendation list, but has easy parking and doesn't ask many questions. I sat in the car for 20 minutes. I wasn't waiting for anything specific. I was waiting for my courage to catch up to my body. At 10:40 that Friday morning, I watched them walk out through the side entrance of the hotel. Desiree had a small bag on her shoulder and was wearing a dress I recognized, not from seeing her in it before, but from a photo she'd sent me 2 months earlier with the caption, "Found this on sale. Do you love it?" It was a coral wrap dress with gold detail at the waist. I had told her it was beautiful. I had told her it would look great on her. Marcus had his hand on the small of her back, not the hand of two friends walking together, the hand of someone who is used to being there. They stopped on the sidewalk. He said something I couldn't hear. She threw her head back and laughed. Easy, free, the laugh of someone with nothing to hide because she thinks no one is watching. He was smiling too. That particular smile of his when he was relaxed, when he believed the world was exactly where it was supposed to be. I was less than 15 yards away, inside the car, windows up. Neither of them saw me. And that's when something happened that I can't explain cleanly, because it isn't a feeling that has a proper name. The pain was there, enormous, physical, the kind that squeezed my chest so hard I pressed my palm against my sternum just to make sure I was still breathing. But alongside the pain, there was something else, a coldness, a clarity. Like the last wall I had been using to protect myself from the truth had come down, and where the protection used to be, there was only solid ground. I took out my phone and photographed them both. I'm not entirely sure why in that moment. Instinct, maybe. Or the part of me that already knew I was going to need proof. Not for a judge, not for the family, but for myself. For the days when I might doubt what I had seen. Marcus requested a ride share. They hugged before she got in. It was a long hug. He stood on the sidewalk watching the car pull away with the expression of a man who is at peace with his life. I started my engine and drove away before he turned around. 2 miles later, I had to pull over on a side street because my hands were shaking too hard to drive. I sat there for 40 minutes. I didn't cry. I just stayed still, staring at the windshield, understanding something I already knew, but that my heart had refused to accept until that moment. I wasn't losing a husband. I was losing the sister who never existed. Before I tell you what I did when I got back to Atlanta, the steps I took, the decisions I made with a cooler head than I knew I was capable of in the middle of that kind of pain, I need to ask you something. Tell me in the comments, have you ever found out about a lie at the exact moment you thought you were safe? Because that's exactly where they hurt the most. Not when you already had your doubts. When you still believed. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. There's more. I didn't call Marcus that afternoon. Didn't text him. Didn't call Desiree. I did nothing they could use to get ahead of what was coming. I drove back to the Buckhead house, let myself in through the front door, put my keys on the entryway table, and stood there for a moment looking at the framed floor plan, the drawing I had done by hand before renovating my mother's house. Every room in that house had existed in my head before it existed in real life. Every wall had a decision of mine in it. That house was, in the most concrete sense possible, the result of who I was. I didn't take the frame down that day, but I looked at it differently, the way you look at something when you're starting to say goodbye. Over the next 2 days, while Marcus was still in Savannah believing he had the situation under control, I worked. First thing, I called my attorney, Patricia, the same one who had handled the house title years earlier. I set a meeting for Monday. I explained the situation clearly and without emotion. The house was in my name exclusively. It was documented inheritance received before the marriage, and under Georgia law, separate property brought into a marriage remains separate property in a divorce as long as it hasn't been commingled. Patricia confirmed what I already suspected. The house was mine. There was nothing to dispute. Second thing, I went to my bank Saturday morning and separated the accounts. Joint account closed. Personal account reorganized. I had my own savings. I always had, on principle, because an architect who doesn't maintain an independent foundation is not an architect who trusts her own work. That principle saved me. Third thing, I called Patricia again and told her I wanted to explore listing the house, not out of financial need, by choice. I didn't want to live at that address anymore, surrounded by everything that had been buried there. She referred me to a real estate agent she trusted. I called her that same Saturday afternoon. Fourth thing, I went down to Miss Gloria's, knocked on her door, sat in her living room with a cup of sweet tea she insisted on making, and listened to everything she knew. Dates, approximate times, what her son had told her about Marcus's call asking for silence. She spoke with guilt in her voice, but also with the relief of someone who can finally tell the truth. At the end, I said, "Miss Gloria, you don't owe me anything. You were more honest with me than the people who were supposed to be." She cried. So did I. Marcus came home Sunday night, walked in with his suitcase, a well-rested smile, kissed me on the cheek like those 3 days had been exactly what he said they were. "That trip wore me out," he said, setting his suitcase down in the bedroom. "I imagine it did," I answered, from the living room, eyes on the project I was reviewing at the table. There was a moment that night when he stood in the doorway of the living room, watching me with an expression I couldn't fully read. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the instinct of someone who senses something has shifted but can't figure out what. He asked if I was okay. I said I was just tired. A lot going on at work. He nodded and went to bed. I stayed up until 2 in the morning, reviewing every clause Patricia had sent me by email. Monday, while Marcus was at work, the real estate agent came to the house for the initial walkthrough. Tuesday morning, I signed the listing agreement. It was only then that I sat down, looked at the framed floor plan in the entryway, and cried for the first time since that morning on the sidewalk in Savannah. Not from anger, not from hatred. I cried from grief, for the marriage I had believed in, for the sister I had built in my mind out of someone who never was that person, for the version of myself that needed to go with them so that a new version could begin. After I was done crying, I got up, went to the kitchen, made coffee, and kept going. The confrontation with Marcus happened on a Wednesday night, 2 weeks after I came back from Savannah. I chose the moment. I didn't let him choose it. When he got home, I was sitting in the living room with my laptop closed in front of me, and the photos from the sidewalk in Savannah open on my phone screen, face up on the table. He stopped in the entryway, looked at the phone, looked at me. I said, with a calm I surprised myself with, "Sit down, Marcus. I've already made the decisions that needed to be made. You just need to know what they were." He went pale, and I told him. What happened in the months that followed was the collapse of everything Desiree and Marcus had built, not by my hand, but by the consequences of what they had chosen to do. When Marcus realized the house was listed for sale, he tried to challenge it. Patricia responded with the documentation. The property was documented inheritance, titled in my name before the marriage, and under Georgia's separate property statute, there was nothing to dispute. He spent 4 days trying to call me. I didn't answer. On the 5th attempt, he sent a written text saying he had made the worst mistake of his life, that Desiree had pursued him in a way he didn't know how to handle, that he was sorry. I read the message once. I didn't respond, because what he was saying, between the lines, was that the responsibility was hers. And maybe it was, in part. But he had also made choices. He had chosen to stay. He had chosen to call Mr. Theodore asking him to stay quiet. He had chosen the smile on the sidewalk. Desiree called me 3 times the same week. I didn't answer. Then she sent a long text. I read it, didn't reply, saying she loved me, that she had let herself get carried away by something she didn't know how to stop, that she didn't want to lose me as a sister, that she was destroyed by what she had done. There was one line in the middle of that message that stayed with me. I never wanted to be you, Michelle. I just wanted to have what you had. That's an honest line, at least. And that's exactly why it hurts so much. The relationship between Desiree and Marcus lasted less than the guilt they carried. I heard through my cousin Angela that they were together for just over 4 months after everything came out. 4 months during which he didn't trust her. Because deep down he knew that a woman who does this to her own sister is capable of doing it to anyone. And he was right. Desiree ended it over text on a fall afternoon without much ceremony. The family found out. My Aunt Deborah, my mother's sister, the matriarch, the hardest woman to impress I have ever known, called Desiree and said things I wasn't there to hear, but that Angela summarized for me with one sentence. Aunt Deborah told her their mother would be ashamed. Desiree didn't come to the family Christmas gathering that December, nor the following January. The house sold in February of 2022 for $1,280,000. With that money, I bought a smaller place that was entirely mine, in a neighborhood I chose alone, without consulting anyone. No framed floor plan on the wall. Not yet. Before I left the Buckhead house for the last time, I went to the entryway and took the floor plan off the wall. Slowly, carefully. That drawing was mine. It was my work, my history, my name. I tucked it under my arm and walked out. I left the keys with Mr. Theodore, who held my hand in both of his and didn't need to say a word. I want to talk to you about something that took me a long time to understand, and I'm going to say it carefully because this deserves care. When a sister betrays you, it is not the same pain as when a friend betrays you. It is not the same pain as when a coworker stabs you in the back. It is not even the same pain as when a partner leaves you for some other woman. It's different because the bond between sisters is not just affection, it's identity. A sister has known you since before you had awareness of yourself. She was present during the moments when you were being formed. She knows your fractures because she was made from the same material as you, just in a different order. When that person uses what she knows about you to destroy you, it isn't just a betrayal. It is a violation of the place where you kept who you were. In my case, it was worse because Desiree used exactly what I had given her from the heart. I opened my home when she was falling apart. I told her my fears about the marriage. I told her I was scared Marcus was pulling away after the pregnancy loss, that I didn't know how to reconnect with him, that I felt guilty for working so hard. I handed her the map of my vulnerabilities, and she used it as a blueprint. I'm not telling you this to frighten you. I'm not telling you to stop trusting your sister or the people you love. What I am saying is that there is a difference between healthy intimacy and the kind of intimacy that makes us invisible to ourselves. Healthy intimacy is mutual. You open up, the other person opens up, there is a balance. What existed between Desiree and me, I understand now, was not balance. It was me supplying material and her filing it away for later use. There is a sign I learned to recognize too late. When someone uses what you told them in confidence to give advice, but the advice never actually protects you. Remember when Desiree told me, "Don't go making something out of nothing," when I said Marcus seemed distant? She wasn't comforting me. She was blinding me. It was in her interest that I not look carefully at what was happening. People who use your secrets against you rarely do it crudely. They do it gently. They do it while appearing to help. There's another sign. When someone knows every detail of your plans but rarely tells you hers. Desiree knew everything about my life. The marriage, the finances, the house, the fears, the future plans. I barely knew what she did on weekends. There was a profound imbalance in how much each of us revealed, and I normalized that imbalance because I was the older sister, because I believed that caring for someone meant giving, not receiving. Caring without reciprocity is not love, it's an offering. The last thing I want to say about this is, your family is going to ask you to forgive quickly. They'll tell you she's your sister, that blood is blood, that your mother wouldn't want to see you like this. I heard that. I heard it from people I respect. I understand the impulse. Family is afraid of the empty space that remains when a bond breaks, and it asks the victim to fill it because that's easier than holding the person who created the hole accountable. But there is a fundamental difference between forgiving and reconciling. I can, over time, reach a place where what Desiree did no longer eats at me from the inside. That is forgiveness, and it is a gift I give to myself, not to her. Reconciling would mean pretending that what happened doesn't reveal who she is, and I can't do that because I learned in the most expensive way possible that some people you only truly know when they think you aren't watching. I didn't lose a marriage. I lost the sister I never actually had. Today, I live in a two-bedroom condo in Virginia Highland in Atlanta. It's smaller than the Buckhead house. The morning light isn't as good, the view isn't as striking, and it is the most mine place I have ever lived. In the living room, hanging on the entryway wall, is the framed floor plan, the same frame, the same drawing I did by hand years ago before renovating my mother's house. Now it doesn't tell the story of a marriage, it tells the story of a woman who designs what she's going to build before she raises the walls. I always knew how to do that. I just took too long to apply it to my own life. The firm is doing well, better than ever, honestly. When you stop dividing your energy between the work and the people who drain what you produce, there is so much more left for what matters. I have a small team I chose with care. I have clients who respect what I do. I have a routine that is entirely mine. Desiree never reached out again after those 3 calls I didn't answer. I heard through Angela that she's back in Savannah, that she changed jobs, that she's doing fine in the surface-level sense of the word. I don't wish her harm. I don't want her to suffer. I just had to learn that loving someone and having them in your life are things that can, and sometimes must, exist separately. Marcus I haven't heard from directly since. I don't need to. If you're listening to this story and you recognize a sign, the sister who knows too much about your partner, the advice that always steers you away from suspicion, the imbalance between how much you share and how much she shares, I'm not telling you that you're being betrayed. I'm telling you, pay attention, not with paranoia, with clarity. Because the difference between the woman I was and the woman I am today is not that I learned to distrust everyone. It's that I learned to look with open eyes at what's right in front of me. The house sold, the marriage ended, the man left, the sister left. And I am still here, standing, with my floor plan on the wall and my work on the table. That's enough. Actually, it's more than enough. I need you to do something right now. Write in the comments, "I am what's left after they thought they broke me." Write it in all caps if you need to, because sometimes what keeps us standing is knowing we are not standing alone. And tell me, have you ever been betrayed by someone inside your own family? You don't have to give names, but if you want to share, I'm here. That's what this channel is for. Until the next story.